Kabuki and Yurai. Adaptations and explanations of famous Kabuki Yurai. The Kabuki ghost of Kohara Koheinji, translated from the Fukushu Kaidan Asaka no Nima. What happens when a man who is a master of playing a Yurai in Kabuki dies and becomes a Yurai himself? That is the question answered in the strange story of Kohara Koheinji, the Kabuki actor who finally assumed the role he was born to play. Kohara Koheinji was a third-rate Kabuki actor struggling to make a living in the Edo Kabuki stage during the time of Ichikawa Danjuro II. Kohara lacked both natural talent and experience, and could not be cast in a role. Feeling sorry for him, Kohara's drama instructor bribed a director to cast Kohara in some role, any role, just so that Kohara would finally be able to take the stage. The director took one look at Kohara and saw that he bore a natural resemblance to the Yurai characters of Kabuki. His skin was white, his eyes dark and sunken, and his hair long and unruly. The director thought he could save money on makeup and costume and cast Kohara in the Yurai role of the play. While it wasn't exactly his dream role, Kohara saw this as his big break and threw himself into studying. He went to the morgue to observe dead faces and learned how to slack his face muscles and hold his body like a dead man. His diligence paid off, and Kohara was an overnight success. His fame spread. However, his skill was limited. He could only be cast in Yurai roles, which led his fellow actors to nickname him Yurai Kohara. Kohara had a wife named Otsuka, whom he was deeply in love with. Otsuka, however, did not return the affection and thought Kohara was an embarrassing fool. Behind his back, she was having an affair with a fellow actor named Arachi Sakuro. Together they hatched a plot to get rid of Kohara. When they were away together on a tour, Adachi invited Kohara to go fishing. Suspecting nothing, Kohara went out with Adachi on a boat into the Asaka swamp. Once they were far out from shore, Adachi surprised Kohara, pushing him off the boat and holding him under the water until he drowned. Adachi hurried back to let Otsuka know that he had cleared the path to their love. But he was not the only one. Kohara was not content to lie dead at the bottom of the swamp. He rose again as a Yurai and went to meet Adachi and Otsuka in Edo. As might be expected, Kohara was a fabulous Yurai. More than any man alive, he had practiced enough to perfect the role. His new dead self looked exactly as he had on the stage, and he knew every trick to elicit terror in the cheating, murderous couple. He haunted them relentlessly, driving them mad, and eventually to their own unnatural deaths. It was always assumed that the story was true. It was passed around town as an urban legend, with bits and pieces being gathered and attached here and there. We know the details of Kohaidan Koheichi's story thanks to Yamakaze Yoshishige, a historical investigator who wrote the journal Umiroku, Record of the Sea, from 1820 to 1837. Yamazaki investigated the story of Kohara Koichi and found that glimmers of the story began around the 1700s. Piecing everything together, he discovered the model for the story, a traveling entertainer whose name was actually Kohada Kohaichi. Kohada had apparently been a terrible actor who killed himself out of despair for his lack of talent. His wife was not saddened by the loss and asked a friend to help her cover up the embarrassing death, hoping to report Kohada as missing. They did not do a good job, and the deed was uncovered. The real wife was rumored to have had an affair with the real Adachi Sakuro. Kohada's body was discovered in Chiba Prefecture in Inba Swamp. When that story became news, it was only a small leap from the true story for townspeople to speculate that Kohada's wife and Adachi had actually killed Kohada. From there, the story gained traction. The details were filled in and the supernatural elements added. Like another kabuki ghost, Oiwa, Kohada is said to still be haunting the kabuki theater. He is said to especially haunt those who take on his role in kabuki adaptations. The only way to get out of this curse is to make an offering at his grave before taking on the role. Ever since the Edo period, actors taking on the Yurai roles were thought to take their lives into their own hands. Of women's hair, excerpted from Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan, 1894, by Lavacadio Hearn. In Japanese folklore, women's hair has always been thought to have a supernatural quality about it. Much like the Medusa myth of ancient Greece, a Japanese woman's hair was thought to be able to transform into snakes, especially when the strong emotions of jealousy and spite were involved. It was common in feudal Japan for powerful men to keep mistresses, and the wife and the mistress would sleep in the same room together in the women's quarters. In some cases, when the two women did not get along, it was said that the hair of one would reach over and strangle the other in the night while they were sleeping. Traditionally, the hair of dead women was arranged in a style called tabanegami, which was unornamented and tied together like a sheaf of rice. The long, loose hair of the yurai is also thought to resemble the hanging branches of a willow tree, and that tree is considered to be a favorite location for female yurai, where they can hide in the shadows and their ghostly hair merges with the shadows of the ghostly trees. World Over There. Stories from the world over there, in which a wife meets her smoking husband after his death. Translated from Konjaku Monogatari. A man from Yamato province had a daughter who was in love with a skillful flute player from Kawuchi province. The two were married, and they lived together for 2 years, full of love and happiness. Sadly, the husband was struck by a sudden illness and died. The woman was overcome with sadness and would do nothing but cry and mourn her husband. Other men came to her earnestly and with good intentions, but she would not even look at them. The woman filled her life only with memories of her dead husband. 3 years passed in this way. One summer night, when the woman lay crying at home, she thought she heard faint strains of a flute music her husband once played. Listening closely, she heard a voice of the next room saying, "Please open this door and let me in." There was no mistake. It was her husband's voice. The woman peeked through the gap in the boards of the door and saw her dead husband standing there. He was playing a song that he had composed for her long ago. He looked exactly as he had when he was still alive, and when seeing him, the woman was chilled to the bone and overcome with fear. She looked closer and saw smoke escaping from the folds of his hakama trousers that covered his kimono, even where they were bound by a cord. When the husband spoke, more smoke came from his mouth. "What is this? You were so sad and weeping and longing for me that I could get no rest. But now that I have come back to see you, you sit there shivering in fear? If that is the kind of greeting I get, then I will just go back. For this I withstood the scorching heat of hell?" And with that said, the man disappeared. So they say. Gata Gata Bashi, the rattling bridge, translated from Kyoka Hyoku Monogatari. In the village of Ozaka, in the province of Hida, modern-day Gifu Prefecture, there lived a man named Keimon. In front of his house was an old woman's suspension bridge that led across a mountain valley to the neighboring village. One night, while Keimon was in his house, he heard the distinct rattling sound of someone crossing the bridge, accompanied by whispering voices. Making the crossing was far too dangerous at night, so Keimon rushed out of his house to warn the travelers, whoever they might be. He saw nothing. This continued for night after night, always the rattling of the bridge and the whispering. On some nights, he even heard cries of sorrow and people weeping. Unsure of what to do, Keimon consulted a fortune-teller who told him that what he was hearing was a parade of the dead on their way to Tachiyama, modern-day Toyama Prefecture. It was known that there were several entrances to hell located in Tachiyama, and that the Majia, dead people, must have recently discovered his bridge as an expedient path. Hearing that, Keimon resolved to move his entire household as far away from the bridge as possible, and also arranged to have memorial service held at the bridge, praying to ease the sentence of these poor spirits cast into hell. He had a permanent memorial posted at the bridge, and from that time no more strange sounds were heard. However, that bridge is still known to this day by the name of Gata Gata Bashi, meaning rattling bridge. The rule of the dead, of gods and death. Izanagi and Izanami, translated and adapted from the Kojiki. When the world was still in its chaotic state, two deities, Kun Ito Kachi and Amenomina Kanushi, arose from nothing and became the rulers of the sky. They created two divine beings, Izanagi and Izanami, and charged them to go down to earth and make something useful of the remaining terrestrial realm. When walking down the Amino Ukihashi, floating bridge of heaven, the two realized that there was nothing for them to stand on down below. So Izanagi received a jeweled spear named Amino no Nuboku, Spear of Heaven, given to him by the two sky deities, which he swirled into the chaos of the ocean and created the first island, Ono Goroshima, self-forming island. When they arrived on the island, Izanagi and Izanami realized that their bodies were different. Perhaps they were intended to be joined. Performing a marriage ceremony, they built a pillar called Amino Mihashira, Pillar of Heaven, which Izanami walked around to the right and Izanagi to the left. Upon meeting in the middle, Izanami spoke first, saying, "Ah, what a fair and lovely youth." And Izanagi replied, "Ah, what a fair and lovely maiden." They consummated their marriage, but their first child was a wretched leech child called Hirako, and a faint island named Awashima. Izanagi decided that their deformed child came about because Izanami, the female, spoke first during their wedding ceremony, which was a breach of etiquette. They performed the circle around Amino Mi Harashira again, this time with Izanagi first proclaiming, "Ah, what a fair and lovely maiden." Izanami replied after Izanagi had spoken. This was a successful exchange, and Izanami gave birth to 35 gods and 14 islands. However, when birthing the fire god Kagu Tsuchi no Kami, Izanami was badly burned and became the first thing to die in this new world. Overcome with grief, Izanagi chopped off Kagu Tsuchi no Kami's head, from which were born the numerous deities of mountains, rocks, fire, and sharp snapping noises. Izanagi then made the perilous journey to the land of Yomi, deep underground, where Izanami's spirit remained. Finding his beloved sister-wife's spirit down below, he was distraught to hear that she had eaten of the cooking furnaces of Yomi and would not be able to return. Izanami begged Izanagi not to look at her, but Izanagi lit a fire on his comb and beheld her. He was shocked to see her rotting flesh and polluted body, and fled from the land of Yomi, with Izanami in close pursuit, accompanied by the 8 ugly females of Yomi. After a fierce battle, Izanagi escaped and closed the entrance to Yomi with a massive boulder and shouted the words of divorce to his sister-wife. Enraged, Izanami vowed that she would cause the deaths of 1,000 living beings daily as revenge. In response, Izanagi vowed to cause the birth of 1,500 living beings every day. Thus the balance between birth and death came to mortal things. Aiyo no Ui, adapted from the No play of the same name by Motoko Kiya Ziami, Muromachi period. Lady Ayo, the formal wife of the shining prince Genji Hikari, is possessed by a malevolent spirit and has fallen deathly ill. All the cures offered by the science of medicine have had no effect. So in desperation, the family summons the help of an exorcist. Priestess Teruhi, master of the art of Azusa, is said to be able to summon spirits with the sound of her cherry birch bow. By plucking on her bow, the possessing entity is revealed to be none other than Rokujo no Miyasudokoru, Lady Rokujo. Although a sophisticated and noble woman of good family and breeding, Lady Rokujo has been driven mad by her own jealousy after being spurned by her lover, Prince Genji, who chose to honor his wife over the distraught Lady Rokujo. In the same way that Lady Ayo has stolen Prince Genji's affections, the living spirit of Lady Rokujo plans to steal the life from Lady Ayo's body. Realizing that she has not enough strength to withstand such a powerful jealousy, Priestess Teruhi summons the help of Yokawa no Kohirechiri, master of the secret ways of Shugendo, and skilled in exorcism. The battle is bitter, and Lady Rokujo attacks not only the Lady Ayo, but also the vulnerable Yokawa no Kohirajiri. However, the strength of the priest wins out, and Lady Rokujo is calmed and enters the merciful arms of the Buddha. The Festival of the Dead. Yurai of Water and Fire. Tale of the Funan Yurai. Translated from Nihon no Obaki Banashi. Long ago, it was said that when a boat put out to sea on New Year's Eve, it was sure to catch the eyes of a Funan Yurai. A Funan Yurai is said to be the soul of a drowning victim. Bitter and wrathful towards the living, it rises up from the bottom of the sea to attack boats. One time, at Mizushi Manada, in the Seto Inland Sea, west of modern-day Okayama Prefecture, a lone boat crossed the water heavy with goods for the New Year's festival. Due to the nature of its cargo, the boat had no choice but to cross on New Year's Eve, and was now being tossed about by the white-capped waves. "What? Do you fear to go sailing on New Year's Eve? Are we boatmen to have our livelihoods ended out of fear of the Funa Yurai? The sky may be black as ink without a star in sight, but the wind is favorable, and if we hold our course steady, we will be back home before we even left." Cheering themselves up in this manner, the boatmen continued along the pitch-black sea. For a time, everything was good. Their sails were full of wind, and they were traveling so fast, it was as if they were flying over the water. But suddenly the skies opened up, and a hammering rain began to fall. "Damn! This is some pretty bad stuff coming down on us." The boatmen didn't stop their work for even a moment, and kept the boat steady as the violence of rain increased. Suddenly the boat ground to a halt, as if something had moved up behind it and grabbed it. The wind fell to a dead calm. "What just happened? Where is our wind?" Just then, just as suddenly, they were blasted by a fierce breeze that seemed to have come straight from the heart of winter. "Everyone, push us ahead! Heave to those oars!" To the shock of the boatmen, the boat held its ground, frozen to the spot as if it had set down roots. "What is that?" From deep under the water, something was drifting up towards the boat. It looked almost like floating balls of cotton. No, it can't be. The white shapes moved relentlessly upwards, increasing in size as they approached. The boatman could see them now, wrapped in kimono as white as snow, their hair floating wildly in the water. From below, a ghastly light illuminated their faces. There was no doubt that these were the dreaded Funa Yurai. "Lend us a hishaku. Lend us a spoon." Their ghostly hands stretched up from the waves, and their voices carried their bitter grudge toward the living. It is known that if you should find yourself in such a situation, and overcome by fear, you actually hand over a hishaku spoon they are requesting. Then you are as good as dead. Before your eyes, a single hishaku spoon was split into multiple spoons, and arms beyond your ability to count will stretch out from the ocean. "Iya, iya, iya," singing their loathsome song with voices filled with hate, the Funa Yurai will ladle water from their infinite spoons until your boat is swamped. And if this is not enough to sink your boat, they will reach up and drag it to the bottom of the ocean. How many hundreds of ships have been sunk in this manner? No, not to you. We will never lend you a spoon. These boatmen, shivering so badly they could barely hold their oars, refused absolutely and pulled the water with all their strength. This did not discourage the Funa Yorai. Slowly the boat moved forward in the water, followed closely by the Funa Yorai. Go away! Just go away! The boatmen took their oars and began to beat with all their might on the heads of the Funa Yorai. Lend us a hishaku. Lend us a spoon. A Funa Yorai grabbed hold of one of the oars and pulled with such strength that one of the boatmen was dragged into the ocean. No! Letting go of the oar, he clambered up the side of the boat, upsetting the lantern they had used to guide their way through the black night. Sparks flew off the lantern, and the Funa Yorai fled before the power of the flame. With that, the boat that had been held almost still in the water suddenly broke free and sped along smoothly. Thanks to that lantern. The boatmen pulled with all of their remaining strength to the shore. This legend comes from the Okayama Prefecture, from an Edo period book called Kashi Yawa. A fishing village in this area still sells specifically made hisaku spoons with holes that are said to ward off the Funa Yorai. The Funa Yorai are found not only in the Seto Inland Sea, but anywhere in the waters surrounding Japan. Always they ask for the hishaku spoon. Because of this, some boats carry a specifically prepared hishaku spoon with holes drilled in it. This way, when they pass over the spoon, the Funa Yorai are unable to fill the boat with water, and the sailors can make their escape.